A transcendent NDE is without question the most profound experience any human being could possibly have. And for what seems obvious reasons, it should be given a proportional amount of attention. I've personally spent countless hours wrestling back and forth with what I should actually believe about these experiences. I tend to find the materialist explanations deeply inadequate, and the spiritual explanations not much better. Throughout my journey exploring this issue, I've read hundreds, probably well over 1,000 near-death experience accounts, and just about everything there is to read about the subject. The things I plan on saying in these videos are certain to be challenging to people of every persuasion and take on the NDE. I believe that an honest assessment of the facts raises more questions than answers. After examining the near-death experience for almost 20 years, I find myself in a state of continuous astonishment at how three particular institutions regularly distort public understanding of the near-death phenomenon. First, we have fundamentalist Christianity, New Age opportunists, and the high priests of dogmatic materialism. They say that when you're a hammer, everything else looks like a nail. If you're a Christian literalist, NDEs of heaven and hell and Jesus are proof of your beliefs. But the NDEs where atheists are embraced by an unconditionally loving light are conveniently ignored. If you're a New Age spiritualist, your acceptance of an afterlife might encourage you to buy into a vast landscape of delusional nonsense and to reject well-established scientific knowledge about the world. If you are a fundamentalist materialist, you insist that every mental phenomenon can only have a neurological explanation, despite having not the slightest comprehension how cell membranes, sodium-potassium channels, electrical action potentials, and protein configurations could possibly generate subjective, conscious awareness. The fact of the matter is that the phenomenon of the NDE just pisses people off to no end. Despite being the best evidence we have of a possible life after death, religious people find that their belief constructs are not supported by the stories. Despite hoping for religious superstition to someday be eradicated from the face of the earth, atheists are resigned to the fact that these experiences are not the product of mere wishful thinking, but the mind-blowing reality of a convincing, direct experience. But there are several other reasons why these experiences are so annoying. After being told ad nauseum that our lives are supposed to be about love, and that love is all that matters, most of us look around and see empty lives full of pointless suffering. Despite our best efforts, our attempts at goodness are often shoved back in our face as we are continually betrayed by a hostile world in which the Darwinian basis of human nature guarantees continuous conflict. The struggle for sex, status, power, and the blatantly Darwinian desire to protect our own genetic offspring seems to be the puppet master motivating all human endeavor, including even the religious and spiritual quest. We are told that we will have to relive all of our experiences in a life review, positive and negative. Several experiencers tell us that seeing the repercussions of their actions was the worst thing they have ever had to go through, easily analogous to certain religious conceptions of hell. Then there's the possibility that we might have to be reborn and experience all of this again under difficult circumstances in order to progress. If this is all true, one wonders how long we have already been toiling away at this, and what calamities and atrocities we've already seen. Many people are deeply offended that jerks and assholes who don't believe in God are loved fully and accepted by the light unconditionally. I've even heard an NDE account of an atheist who was told during his experience that his life's mission was to be an atheist, and that he had successfully fulfilled his mission. Is there really any difference between believing in a God who doesn't exist and believing in none at all? For example, a friend of mine who had a classic NDE where he had 360-degree panoramic out-of-body vision and was embraced by the light and melted to his foundation by overwhelming unconditional love, still prefers to call himself an atheist, despite being convinced of the survival of consciousness after death. All of these factors combine to explain why this issue is such a taboo. The general irritation people have when confronting this most important of topics explains why there is an intentional ignorance, even amongst those who should have the most interest in the subject, neuroscientists and religious leaders. Many skeptics cavalierly downplay the numerous reports of accurate out-of-body perception and the fact that some people claim to have been more consciously aware than ever before as they listen to their medical provider pronounce them dead over their unresponsive body. You would think that the complete and total lack of understanding of how neurons could possibly generate consciousness would give most people pause before dismissing near-death experiences as mere tricks of the dying brain. One of the greatest mysteries of the NDE is how these astonishingly similar experiencer accounts occur under the entire gamut of physiological states. For example, if we set up several classic accounts of people dissociating from their body and traveling towards an unconditionally loving, brilliant light, you would be incapable of determining what state their body was in based on the quality of their experience, whether it was meditation, under anesthesia, after a drug overdose, in a coma, or after cardiac arrest. The narratives are indistinguishable, and amazingly, despite whatever the physiological state is, most experiencers report being more consciously aware than usual. Everyone who studies these experiences is in agreement that there is no singular physiological cause. So any neurological model of the NDE must explain how they happen under the entire spectrum of physiological states, and how people such as René Passereau could have experienced full, uninterrupted consciousness throughout a lengthy ambulance ride, observe herself being pronounced dead, and accurately witness her resuscitation.
The young doctor came over and started arguing with him. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "She was dead on arrival. She had to have been dead for 10, 15 minutes before they brought her in here." And he says, "Now you're going to try to revive her?" He says, "Don't you know?" He says, "Don't you know that's dangerous?" Meanwhile, my doctor is pounding and pounding on the heart. He says, "Don't you know that could be dangerous? Don't you know she could have brain damage from this?" And my doctor stopped pounding for a minute and stood up. He says, "Well, what the hell? She can't be in much worse shape than she is now."
A simple rule of thumb is this: if you can dream up an explanation of the near-death experience, it will be floated up the flagpole and the skeptical crowd will salute, even if the model is directly contradicted by experiencer accounts. The fact that most people don't read experiencer accounts is always helpful in this process. Throughout the years, skeptics have offered a multiplicity of contradictory arguments, attempting to stitch together an assortment of different phenomena which generally occur under discombobulated states of consciousness, unlike the NDE. Explanations almost always rely on speculations of memory distortion and confabulation in order to explain the coherent, convincing, meaningful, and consistent narratives of these accounts. The fact that there are so many proposed explanations and that the skeptics often don't believe in each other's explanations doesn't seem to deter the faithful from proclaiming that all of this has been explained away. They also seem to be undaunted by the fact that most of the people doing the near-death experience research are in unison that conventional explanations are not adequate to address the phenomenon. An observation of the religious community's response to the near-death experience reveals a near complete denial of the phenomenon as a whole. Even a cursory glance at the near-death literature indicates that there is no support for fundamentalist belief systems. This group rallies around individual best-selling books which support what they wish to believe, while ignoring the breadth of nearly identical experiences in which NDEers are told directly that particular religious identifications are of no importance. One wonders how many variations of blue-eyed European 12-foot Jizai inhabit the realms of heaven, or where all the astral outhouses are stored. Believers will argue that heaven is a place somewhere where plants apparently continue to photosynthesize and flowers are still needed to spread DNA. Gravity is still 9.8 meters per second squared, and huge city walls are still needed to defend the city of heaven during epic medieval battles. Skeptics rightly point out how utterly ludicrous this is, taking it as perfect evidence for there being no need to take the NDE seriously. And yet, we have many NDE accounts where experiencers are directly told by beings of light that the beautiful environment they are seeing is merely a symbolic, thought-created reality designed to make them comfortable. We also have several accounts where experiencers are told directly by the light that the religious figure they are perceiving is merely symbolic. Andrew C. found himself in an immense light. There was a query from the light where he was given several options over which religious figure he chose to see within the light. He chose Jesus Christ, and part of the light formed into an image of Jesus wearing a blue robe. He states this was done to make him feel comfortable. Mel and Thomas had virtually the same experience. The light kept changing into different figures: Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, mandalas, archetypal images, and signs. He asked the light for clarification. The light responded telepathically that during your life after death experience, your beliefs shape the feedback you get from the light. If you are a Buddhist or Catholic or fundamentalist, you get a feedback loop of your own stuff. You have a chance to examine it, but most people do not. I would posit that the only rational way to make sense of the NDE as a real afterlife experience is to believe that an explanation such as this is true. Using the NDE phenomenon to defend a religious belief construct is logically impossible. This leaves fundamentalists in a quandary. They are forced to either accept that their belief systems are inaccurate or believe that the best evidence we have for survival after death is not valid. To summarize this brief little overview of the subject, the near-death and other spiritual experiences challenge the worldviews of virtually every type of person who looks into it honestly. In general, people see what they expect to see, and where their beliefs don't fit what is known, they typically seek to distort the data or ignore it. Ultimately, there is a yes or no answer to the greatest of questions. We are either completely annihilated at death, or consciousness really does survive.